friends, welcome to Mini Mastermind, and this is Mahara speaking all again. Friends, today's topic is the second method that governments use to earn income. It is known as borrowing. Now, before we start learning about government borrowing, I hope you've listened news on Sri Lankan economic crisis. The main reason behind that crisis is less tax collection and excessive borrowing. Same Sri Lankan kind of situation happened in Argentina in 2000. Now, the Argentine economy took less time for recovering from that crisis, but Sri Lanka is still undergoing that crisis. So, in the end of this video, I'll discuss Sri Lankan economic crisis as case study. But the question is why government needs to borrow when they already have the tax method, which I explained earlier. You see, the government needs to fund roads, dams, schools, and other infrastructure. The sudden expense of war and big pandemics can also demand the need to raise funds. And taxes cannot come so suddenly. Taxes can only come at a particular period of time. So, the government needs to borrow from external sources. Now, those sources can be either domestic or foreign lenders. Okay, borrowing can help a government raise funds for infrastructure projects, social programs, and other expenses. Now, a government typically borrows by issuing bonds to investors and financial institutions. Now, what are bonds? That I'll explain later in this video only. So, how a bond works? Just government will pay you the interest for a period of time, and when the bond reaches maturity, it will pay you the whole principal amount. The government gets most of its income in the form of taxes, but the government needs to borrow in order to meet its planned expenditures. And any of the borrowed money has to be repaid eventually. So, a significant portion of the budget of the government is left for debt repayments. Let me explain you the basic idea through this picture. Now you can see this picture. Here the government asks the individual if he would buy a bond of $1 million US. Then the investor asks for the interest rate because nobody would give their money away without any profit, right? So then the government replies by telling him that it would give him an interest of 5% every year. Then the investor agrees and the transaction takes place. Firstly, the investor arranges $1 million US. Also, the government prepares a bond, and after both of the works are completed, the transaction takes place. Now, in this transaction, the government exchanges a bond, which is nothing but merely an IOU, for $1 million US. Now, the government can give you a bond either in the form of a soft copy or a hard copy. Nowadays, bonds are kept mostly in soft copies because technologies are climbing greater heights day by day. And if you have your bond in the soft copy format, then it will be more secure, because if you have kept the bond in the hard copy format, then chances of theft are there, and maybe it will get torn. So out of all this, we get the conclusion that keeping bonds in soft copies is more popular than keeping bonds in hard copies nowadays. Now I'm using the word bond at many places. What is a bond? Why do we need a bond? But for understanding bonds, you have to understand IOUs first. An IOU is just a written commitment of the things or money that is borrowed along with the maturity date of its repayment. Friends, I created a detailed video on IOUs along with an example. So guys, I hope you already watched it, and if you didn't, I'll give the link in the description. You can click the link and you can straight away watch my video. Its name is Money Through the Ages, How Money Evolved, Paise Ka Itihas. Now let's come back to bonds. In the current scenario, the government issues IOUs that are called bonds, and there are many kinds of bonds. Bonds are used by companies, municipalities, states, and sovereign governments in order to finance projects corporations. But here I'm talking about government bonds. I'll make a different video on bonds in my personal finance series. Maybe you didn't hear about bonds because it's not very common in India. Why? Because common people can't trade directly with bonds. But in USA, it's very common amongst common people because common people can make trade directly in bonds. In India, if you want to invest in bonds, then you have to invest in some mutual fund that is working with bonds. A bond is a fixed income instrument made by an investor to the borrower, and the borrower can typically be corporate or governmental. Now a bond is an IOU made by the lender to the borrower that includes the details about the loan and the repayments. Now friends, I created a video on borrower and lender. Okay, I also gave you an example there. I hope you've gone through that video. If you didn't, I'll give its link also in the description. Please go through it. Its name is Investment Compounding and ROI Basics. A bond is referred to as a fixed income instrument since bonds traditionally pay a fixed interest rate, which is known as a coupon, to the debt holders. Now, fixed interest rate is called the coupon, which is not the coupon of any supermarket, okay? Coupon is the name of committed interest rate which is mentioned in bonds. Now, bonds are issued by the government treasury, like the US Treasury or the Indian Treasury. Bonds issued by the government treasury having the duration of 1 year or less are known as bills, and those bonds which have the duration of 1 to 10 years are known as notes, and those bonds which have the duration of more than 10 years are known as bonds. So here we came across 3 new words: bills, notes and bonds. So what is bills? Bills are the bonds which are having the tenure of 1 year or less. Notes are the bonds which are having the tenure of 1 to 10 years. Okay, and bonds are those bonds which have the tenure of more than 10 years. The government will then pay a fixed rate of interest to the investor, paying the bond back in full when it reaches maturity. Means that bonds have maturity dates at which point you have to pay, you will get the whole principal amount only principal, okay, not the interest. And if there isn't enough money to pay back the bond, then the company or the government may default, like the Sri Lankan case. Excessive borrowing will result in high levels of government debt. Now, any debt that the government takes on must be eventually repaid along with the interest on that debt. A certain level of debt repayment must always be maintained by the government to avoid default or excess interest to be incurred on that debt. Now let me make you aware about the dangers of defaulting. If a government fails or refuses to pay back some of its debt it owes, then it is said to have defaulted. Okay, so defaulting means that it is unable to keep its repayment on some of the debt it owes. And if a government defaults, then it will have a negative effect on that country's economy. But who is buying those government bonds? Both foreign and domestic investors like commercial banks and mutual funds can buy those government bonds through the broker. Okay, while common public can't invest in bonds directly, they can invest in those mutual funds which are investing in those bonds. Now, can investors sell their bonds before maturity? Yes, they can, but they cannot sell it back to the government. Actually, they will have to sell that bond to any other investor in the bond market. In one of my earlier videos, I had told you one example of secure investment. It was known as FD, but here now I'm telling you another investment choice, which is government bonds. It is also a secure investment, and both FD and government bonds are fixed income instruments. But which one of them are better? The advantage of FDs are that they have higher interest rates than government bonds. But does it mean that government bonds don't have any advantages? No, actually, government bonds give you tax benefits. Hope you now got the idea of bonds and borrowing. Now, friends, let's discuss one more type of bonds. It is known as the sovereign gold bond. Now, it is in India only. Okay. Now, here the governments can borrow funds directly from their own citizens, and here there is no involvement of the US dollars. Okay. So the government feels it more safe to produce sovereign gold bonds. And now sovereign gold bonds are very popular amongst India, so you must be all knowing about it. Okay. So these bonds have the interest rate of 2.5% yearly, and its duration is 8 years. Okay. The sovereign gold bond scheme was launched by the Indian government on November 2015. In the sovereign gold bond, you will get 2.5% interest rate every year, and at time of maturity, you will get the principal amount. You will get the market price of gold. Now let's have the case study of Sri Lankan economic crisis. Sri Lanka is currently facing an economic crisis. So the Sri Lankan economic crisis is a result of the large-scale borrowing done by their government, and due to this, they had no money to repay their bonds, which were matured ones. Okay, so they started defaulting. Now you guys must be knowing that Sri Lanka is such a beautiful country, and its economy depended on international tourism, because when international tourists came, they brought US dollars with them, and they exchanged it in the Sri Lankan forex markets. So where did those dollars go? They went to the government's foreign reserve. And when the COVID-19 lockdown came, the international tourists stopped coming. And so the foreign reserve of the government went down as well. This had adverse effects on the country's economy. Due to the crisis, the value of the Sri Lankan rupee has been continuously falling against the US dollar, making imports more expensive than they used to be. Due to this, now the trade deficit also increased. Now, what is a trade deficit? Trade deficit is the difference between the imports and exports. So, actually, in Sri Lanka doesn't have much of its resources with it. So, it has to import it from different countries. But to import it, it has to have high foreign reserve. But when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, then tourists stopped coming. And when tourists stopped coming, the foreign reserve sank, and they had no money to pay for imports. So that's why they could not buy the resources needed for their own citizens. Due to the fall of the Sri Lankan rupee, the value of the assets and the money that Sri Lankans own also has been depreciating. And the rates of unemployment and inflation have been rising very fast, and also there is a shortage of imported items like petrol, diesel, etc. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka has been taking several measures in order to address the crisis, such as increasing the interest rates and implementing currency controls. And the government is also taking several economic reform measures, such as lowering subsidies and increasing the taxes in order to address the crisis. So we can say that both the central bank and the government are working hand in hand to manage their country's economy. Despite these efforts and measures taken by the central bank and the government, it will still take time for the Sri Lankan economy to recover from the crisis. So guys, thank you, goodbye, see you later. This is all for today. And do you know that our late President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam had said that don't fear for facing failure in the first attempt, because even successful maths starts at zero only. Also friends, do not forget to like, share and subscribe my channel if you haven't yet. And guys, click the notification bell so that you will get a notification whenever I release a new video. So guys, thank you. Goodbye.